All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Um, Today's Doctor Talks is with Dr. Kela Henry. We're going to start with introductions, a brief Q&A session, and then move on to participant Q&A session, where you can either leave your questions in the chat or turn your cameras on and ask your questions directly. So let's get started with introductions. Dr. Henry?
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for attending this talk. My name is Dr. Kela Henry. I'm a family practitioner. I'm a speaker and also an author of Nia and the Numbers Game, A Teenager's Guide to Education, Relationships, and Sex. I have been in the practice of family medicine for 18 years, and I am just north of Atlanta in Beaufort, Georgia, and I work for a large hospital system here, Emory University, which is one of the largest actually hospital systems in the state of Georgia. As I was mentioning before, I typically see about 17 to 22 patients a day, primarily adults, but I do see a good number of children, and most of them are teenagers, which is why I wrote my book. I was inspired primarily by the kids that I met in my practice to write Nia and the Numbers Game. Now, outside of the practice of medicine, I do like to give back to the community. So writing my book was one of the ways of doing that, to reach the young ladies who need that kind of role model, and also who are interested in medicine. And this is one of the things I like to do as well, is to talk to young people who are interested in the practice of medicine and also give back to the community in other ways. Actually, earlier in the year, late last year, I did a COVID give back for families in my county who were experiencing some food insecurity due to the pandemic. So I think it's important to not only work, but to also give back to the community, because I realize there are people who made sacrifices for me so that I could be where I am today, and I want to pay it forward. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, thank you so much for coming. Again, everyone, my name is Isabel. I'm the founder and CEO of Future Generations of Medicine, also known as Generation Med Online. And we're so excited to have Dr. Henry here today again. So let's get started with a couple questions from us. You already said a little bit about why you're interested in medicine and also just giving back to your community. But what got you into medicine in the first place?
Well, I know this sounds kind of cliche, but I knew that I wanted to help people. I always knew that, but I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to do it when I started college. And my freshman year, my advisor read my personal statement. So I did. And when I took that class, one of the things I realized is that all of my classmates were aspiring physicians. So in a way, it was like positive peer pressure. And I thought to myself, well, everyone else in here is going to become a doctor. I can do that too. And that's how I started my journey into medicine.
Love that. What class was that again?
It was biology 101.
So intro to biology,
And
you got
I
all the
ended
pre-med
up
stuff.
majoring in biology.
Oh, okay, wow.
Yes.
And besides all the other specialties and career pathways in medicine or where you can help people, why did you choose family medicine?
Initially I thought I was going to go into OBGYN and starting your different specialties. And my family practice rotation was fantastic. I really liked it. I really bonded with the attending physician who I worked with. And that's what changed my mind. And the reality is, as family medicine, we can pretty much do anything. Several of the doctors who trained me at Medical College of Georgia, they did OBGYN. And in fact, for those of you who are familiar with the Gardasil vaccine for HPV, one of the doctors who trained me, Dr. Darren froze.
Thank you. Sorry, I lagged out for a second. um, the next question is, what do you believe are the most rewarding and toughest aspects of being a doctor as well as a published author?
I would say the most rewarding parts are watching some of my patients grow up, actually. I've been practicing now for 18 years. And so there are some kids that I was taking care of at the beginning of my career, and now they are young adults. So it's just great seeing that happen. Also, I love it when patients actually just show me love. They're like, Dr. Henry, thank you so much for, you saved my life. For example, just this past week, I had a telemedicine visit with one of my older gentleman patients. And he just thanked me profusely because I got on his case about his elevated PSA. He had come in to see me for a physical and I had checked it and it was elevated. I told him to go to a urologist to have that checked out. And he was like, "Oh, doc, I feel fine. I don't have any symptoms." I repeated it and it had gone up even higher. And I really, impressed upon him, dude, you need to see Dr. confined to his prostate. And so I love that sort of thing where I realize that I'm reaching people and making an impact. Now, in terms of the difficult parts or the challenging parts of family medicine, I would say first and foremost is losing patients. That's always tough, particularly patients that you're fond of and close to. I had a circumstance earlier this year during COVID where a long-term patient of mine and her daughter both died of COVID. And I went home, I'll be honest, and I just cried that day. This lady she was in her 90s, she was 95. And she and her husband actually, I would tell them they had the Guinness Book of World Records as far as marriage. They had been married 73 years. Can you believe this? They were both in their 90s, the cutest little couple. They always came in together. They were always dressed up as if they were going to church. I mean, they dressed up to come to the doctor's office. And of course, their daughter was their caregiver and brought them in together. So the husband had passed away in 2019. And then this pandemic hit, of course. And I had not seen either one of them for a bit. But again, as I mentioned earlier, when the pandemic hit, we canceled a lot of appointments. And so for a lot of our patients who felt somewhat insecure about coming into the doctor's office, we did telemedicine visits, or they just delayed coming in until things got better. Well, another patient who knew them came in for a visit and said, "Did you hear about Miss So and so?" And I figured she was going to say that she passed away because she was in her 90s. The, the other part that's very challenging for us is what I call the unwanted threesome. And that is the insurance companies and the government in the form of Medicaid and Medicare kind of getting in between the relationship between the doctor and the patient. I feel that my relationship with my patient should be just that. And when I write prescriptions or I order a test, it should just get covered. Like the insurance companies basically trying to dictate to me how to practice medicine. So that's the other, I would say, downside of the practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard so many horror stories from just like dealing with insurance and not being able to access the proper healthcare due to government insurance, etc. Our second to last question here is, do you have any stories you would like to talk about that really stood out to you from either your medical school experience, your education, your residency, or even in your current work environment?
Stood out in a positive way or a challenge, or do you want me to say both?
Uh,
One of each.
Maybe like a challenge you overcame in like a certain environment.
Okay. I would have to say I only had one incident that I would say was a challenge, probably due to being a minority. When I was in residency, there was this one nurse who had a history of, frankly, being kind of nasty to the Black residents or just people of color in general. We'll just say her name was Becky. And one of my good friends, who was a year ahead of me, had a run-in with this woman and decided to work on the other side of the clinic, right? And this same nurse even made a nasty comment to one of our attending physicians, Dr. Mammon, who was a lady from India. She made a comment about, ew, don't come around me with your nasty TB germs, which is just really unprofessional and inappropriate for her to do to a senior physician. And Dr. Mammon had a completely different personality from me, in that she was just more passive and sensitive. And she actually ended up crying about this. Well, Becky made the mistake of trying me. And so I was like, okay, I'm not going to work on the other side of the clinic, and I'm not going to put up with this crap. So what I did is I, motioned for her. I was like, yeah, Becky, and told her exactly, in a nice, nasty way, exactly what I wasn't going to tolerate. So anyway, she then went and made some comments to the Black nurses. Oh, I got your little sister girl told. I said, oh, did she? Like, really? She told me off? So I reported this to our clinic manager. And here's the reality. I understood that as a resident in this program, they had made a big investment in me. And they're paying us, they're training us, and they're not going to just get rid of us because of minor, issues or relationship issues in the clinic. I wasn't about to go anywhere, and I wasn't about to tolerate this nonsense. She wasn't going to run me to the other side of the clinic. So I told the clinic manager, let me tell you this. If Becky thinks that she told me off, the next time she does anything, there will be World War III right here in this clinic in front of everybody, and we'll see who gets who told. Well, needless to say, the clinic manager took a stand. Becky was so offended that he actually defended me and stood up for what was right that she quit. So, however, the rumor got around the clinic, Dr. Henry got Becky fired. And I just let people believe that. I did not get her fired. She actually quit because her reign of terror was over, because the buck stopped with me. And so that was the only, I would say, challenging thing, because I knew it was, about my color, because she did not act this way with the white physicians in our clinic. And I felt like the other Black physicians just felt as though, okay, I just won't deal with her by working on the other side. Well, no, she was one of the nurses, and she was going to have to work with me, and she was going to have to respect me when she worked with me, or we were going to have a problem. And I made it very to you, if you bring a problem to me. I faced it head on. In terms of the rewarding stuff, one of the things I do with young people when they come in the office is I always ask them, what did you get on your last report card? And what do you want to be when you grow up? And so I notice that they'll say, oh, I want to be a pediatrician, or I want to be an attorney, I want to be an engineer, I want to have my own fashion line. But with a lot of the young guys, I get this, I don't know. Or they want to play professional sports, right? So when they tell me they want to play professional football, I kind of go through this exercise with them by asking how many teams are there in the NFL, how many 32 times 53. There are 32 teams, 53 players per team. And then once they work out that answer, I say, okay, now this is how many jobs there are in the NFL in any given year. Are all of the players dying or getting cut, each year? So it's even less than this. And I'm like, if you train your body, you may be able to play for the team, but if you trained your mind, you could possibly own the team. And you need to think about prioritizing your academics over sports, right? So about 8 years later, there was a young man who came back, and he said he remembered that conversation with me. He did go to college and he did have a football scholarship, but he focused on his academics. He used the sports and athletic scholarship in order to get his education for free. Of course, he did not go to the NFL because most student athletes don't. But he came back and he said to me, what you mentioned that day, that stuck in my mind. And I just wanted to let you know that I listened. So I love that. I absolutely loved it. And I wasn't expecting him to come back and tell me that conversation stuck with him.
I guess that conversation sticks with me too, because I'm definitely gonna carry on that advice onto other people. And the advice in story to stick up for yourself no matter what, especially if you're going to be working with them, is super, super
Yes.
inspiring. And the last question for me here today before we go on to participant Q&A in chat, um, as a Black woman and with your platform, either media, your book, or as a physician, what change would you like to make in the field of healthcare?
Well, as I mentioned before, I don't like what I call the unwanted threesome. I really would insurance companies to really take more of a step back and allow the relationship between the doctor and patient to just be more organic. If I was a genie and I could just blink and make that happen, that's what I would do.
All right, well, sounds great. Then moving on to participant Q&A sessions. Again, if you guys have any questions in chat, feel free to leave them. And Dr. Henry, cut me off at any time if you need to leave or you would like to end. All right.
Sure.
So the first question is, how should you answer the interview question, why do you want to be a doctor? What, like, from a student? Mm-hmm.
From a student, sure. Be honest about it. Whatever that is, you need to be authentic because the people who are interviewing you are looking for that. If it seems like just a pat answer, that doesn't stick out much. When I was in medical school, I actually was part of the interview committee for incoming students. So not only did they meet with faculty members, they also met with at least one of the students who was on the committee, because when you think about it, we're going to be potentially going to medical school with these people. So, and we would report back if there was anything about the student that seemed a bit off or not favorable. So answer the question honestly, like I did. I wasn't one of those kids who knew from the time I was 6 years old that I was going to be a doctor. I literally did not make the decision until my freshman year in college when I was taking my first biology course. So if you were one of those folks who you wanted to go into medicine because one of your parents is a doctor and they were an inspiration for you, say that, because that's the truth. But whatever it is, be honest about it.
Absolutely. That's great advice. Thank you. And then our next question in chat is, do you have any advice on applying to college and specifically medical school? Also choosing a specialty.
Okay, so I'll answer this. In terms of applying for college, first and foremost, you need to keep your GPA as high as possible. And also you want to have competitive scores on either your SAT or ACT. And Because if you don't do that, I'm just going to be perfectly honest, there are certain colleges that are not even going to consider your application because you don't meet their standard. Unless, of course, you have very wealthy parents who can pay your way in, right? And you have that relationship. So that's important, is being competitive in terms of your GPA and your scores, and also being a well-rounded student. If you know in high school that you are interested in medicine, then you want to participate in extracurricular activities that support it. So for example, now I didn't know in high school that I was going to go into medicine. I just, at that point, I knew I wanted to help people. However, when I was in college, I joined the Health Careers Club and I was a part of that. So that's something that looks good on your application if you are involved in activities that are related to medicine. As far as like applying to medical school, again, very similar to high school and applying for college. You want to keep your GPA particularly very high in the classes for your major. So for those of us who are going into medicine, most of us will major in one of the sciences, whether that's biology, biochemistry, what have you. You want to make sure that your grades are the highest in those. I mean, obviously you want to make straight A's if you can in everything, but you don't want to do great in foreign language, but then your grades are kind of mediocre in your sciences, if that makes sense. Also, as I already mentioned, you want to get involved in extracurricular activities that are related to medicine, whether that's joining the Health Careers Club or if you have the opportunity to volunteer. I know COVID has made that a bit difficult. Prior to COVID, we allowed students to shadow us at the office, but because of the healthcare system that I work for, that has now become difficult. I would say for those of you who want the opportunity to shadow a doctor, because that's great. That's something that I did between high school and college, is I worked with a doctor in my community. I would say seek out doctors who are independent and don't work for a hospital system, because they don't have all of the red tape and documentation and whatnot that makes it a little more difficult for you to shadow them. So having those opportunities to shadow a doctor, to follow them around and see what it's like in their typical day gives you an idea of whether or not you would want to go into that particular specialty. And as far as choosing a specialty, I mean, for me, I thought I wanted to do OBGYN until I did my family practice rotation, and then I just fell in love with family practice. For many of you, that's when you will make your decision, probably third year of medical school, if you don't know for sure when you start med school what you want to do. And I would say be open-minded to all the specialties, and then whatever is very interesting to you, whatever floats your boat, get your juices flowing, so to speak. That's how you know, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to be a surgeon or a family practitioner or a gynecologist or pediatric oncology, whatever it may be. You rotate through everything third and fourth year, and that's when you'll make your decision.
Yeah, sounds great. And our next question in chat is, what did you do in college to help with applying to med school? Or like what extracurriculars did you do in college?
One of the things I took, there was a course at my college called Special Topics in Medicine. And it was actually an MCAT prep course that was set up as a class. So not only did we get credit for it, but we were getting prepared for the MCAT. And so all of our tests were in the MCAT format. And even the written part of the exam, we did that as part of this class. So I don't know if all colleges have something like that available. If not, definitely taking an MCAT prep course is going to be very important, because just like you need the SAT or ACT for admission to college, the MCAT is essentially your SAT for admission to medical school. And it's going to be very important that you're competitive with that. Also, as I mentioned before, you want to make sure that your grades are as high as possible in your core science classes that you are required to have for admission to med school. And this is a basic kind of common sense thing, but watch out for your deadlines for applications. You do not want to miss any deadlines. Make sure you have all of that organized.
Yeah, definitely being organized is gonna help. And everything you said is so perfect, actually, especially being a college student myself. Um, our next question is, what is a day in the life like as a family medicine doctor?
It can be really busy sometimes because with family medicine, we're not exactly sure what's going to walk in the door, right? Most of my patients are people who have chronic illnesses like high blood pressure, diabetes, asthma, arthritis, and what have you. And I have a lot of people who come in for their annual physicals. And even with the teenagers, a lot of them, when they come in for physicals, it's either back to school physicals or sports physicals so that I can medically clear them to participate in sports. I also have a number of patients who come in for medical clearance prior to getting a surgery done. However, from time to time, there will be an emergency that happens, an elderly patient who is not feeling well. Perhaps they're feeling a bit faint, or they're having fluttering or discomfort in their chest. And we do an EKG and realize, oh my gosh, this person has atrial fibrillation. And so I've got to get them started on medication and refer to our cardiologist who comes to the office once a week. But most of the time, it's just busy from the standpoint of having a number of patients. And I'm one of those doctors who actually listens, and I take my time with patients. I'm not just treating them like, fortunately, some doctors do that. They treat their patients as a number as opposed to a human being who's a unique person with unique issues.
I love that you care about patients on that level. I know some doctors are just like, okay, what's wrong with you? Next patient.
Yes, and they just throw prescriptions at them. And that's one of the compliments that I get a lot from my patients. They say, you know, you actually listen to me, doc. I've been to other doctors. They don't even touch me, or they barely look at me. They just look at the computer. And I make a point of looking at my patient during the conversation and go back and forth between entering information in my electronic medical record and making sure that I'm engaging with them, giving them eye contact and smiling. And I try to establish a rapport with my patients. I don't just walk in and say, okay, good morning, Ms. Jones. Why are you here? For example, we just had Father's Day that passed last weekend. And so all of the gentlemen, when I would come in the office, I would say, hey, you got any big plans for Father's Day this weekend? Are you just going to get an ugly tie and socks? You know, just to get a chuckle and get things going. And I think that helps people to feel more relaxed. I mean, let's face it, doctors' offices are not exactly at the top of the list of places people want to be, right? So if I can make them feel more relaxed and more comfortable, as opposed to feeling tense and worried and scared about, I may, give them bad news or a bad diagnosis, then that's what I want to do. I want them to feel more comfortable with me.
Definitely. And as a doctor, what's your number one priority when it comes to interacting with patients?
Again, making sure that they had a good visit, that they got all of their issues addressed at the visit.
That's great. Oh, we love to see that. And another question in chat is, what was the process of writing a novel and publishing a novel like? Were there any challenges along the way?
Sure. I mean, it was interesting. It was a journey, actually. It took me 2 years to write the book. And if any of you are interested in writing a book, if you think you've got a book inside of you that needs to come out, I would say do it. I mean, number one, figure out what it is you want to write about. Number two, set aside a space and time to do your writing. One of my patients is a prolific author, and I actually consulted with her before I started my book to get some advice from her. And that's one of the things she said. And so I did that. I set up a little space in my home, and I would just sit there and just write and get my ideas together. And so the third step I would say would be, of course, having a trusted person, just another set of eyes, read what you've written because they can catch some of those grammar mistakes and errors, or just give some feedback. And then finally, once you have the book done, then I would seek out a publisher at that point. And for me, I was debating back and forth whether to do self-publishing or traditional publishing. I did have a traditional publisher show some interest in my book, but again, they wanted to make changes. They literally wanted to break it up into two books. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to stay true to what I had written. And so I went the self-publishing route. And I've enjoyed it. There are a lot of pros and cons on both sides, but to me, the self-publishing route had more pros. And so one of the pros, of course, is I'm able to do my own marketing. So, for this talk, right, I'm giving a special for all of you who are participating here. You can get my book, Nia and the Numbers Game, and the accompanying tote for a special price of only $20.
Amazing. And if you guys saw in our newsletter, we also sent out that discount as well as in our Discord community if you guys would like to join that. I'll drop the link later. And
Yes.
another quick question is, as a family
Sure.
medicine doctor, or like as a doctor in general, what type of research have you done? And do you ever go and present somewhere or give talks in like universities, etc.?
Um, I've not participated in any research since I started, but when I was an undergrad, I did research at the University of Florida one summer. I worked with, it was the effect of nitric oxide on pulmonary artery endothelial cells. I don't think I'll ever forget that. Now, as far as, what was the second part of the question? You said research. Oh, speaking opportunities. Yes, actually, since publishing the book, I have been invited to do more speaking. And one of the local colleges here, their honors program, invited me to do a speaking opportunity. And there have been a few nonprofits in the city that have invited me to speak to their students. So that's another source of income, actually, as a physician, is being a paid speaker.
Wow, that's really cool. Maybe this is a little much, but like, what's the process like of people inviting and even like paying you to speak at events?
Bottom line, they approach you, they reach out to you on my website. People can reach out to me there, or for people who know me personally, they can say, hey, I would like for you to come and speak at my church or speak to my youth group, or what have you. And then it's just a matter of getting a contract together. We sign the contract, agree on my speaker's fee, and they pay half up front, and then the other half once I complete the talk, and voila.
Well, sounds
Very
great.
simple.
Very, very straightforward. And the last question for today before we wrap up is, what do you like most about your job? What do you look forward to most when coming in for work every day?
Checking in with particularly my patients who are my regulars. I love those interactions. I have one older gentleman who's been with me my whole career. Every time he comes in, he brings donuts and he says, Dr. Henry, did you get a donut? Brought some donuts for you. Um, and then just those interactions, I think. My patients who are just so nice and sweet, and they're so loving and appreciative. Recently, I had a personal family emergency, and I had to be absent for several weeks because my mom suffered a stroke. And that's the first time I haven't been in the office for, almost 2 months. And now some of my patients knew because I do a live stream every Thursday evening at 7:30 Eastern. Let's Talk Thursdays with Dr. Kela. I do that on my Instagram and my Facebook. And so during the month of April, which was Stress Awareness Month, I was just very transparent and explained to people, listen, I'm acutely aware of stress right now because of what's going on with my mom. And some of my patients knew, and they sent me cards, flowers, and then other patients who were not sure came by the office, and they weren't able, of course, to get an appointment with me because I was in my hometown. And when I got back, they said, Dr. Henry, I didn't know what was going on, but I knew it wasn't like you not to be here. So I just started praying, and I hope your mom is okay. And that really touched my heart. I had one patient who said, Dr. Henry, we just love you, not as our doctor, but just as a person. We love you, and we're just, wishing the best for you. So it's stuff like that that makes it all worthwhile. And I would say for the most part, my patients are really good people. I rarely have a situation where a patient is nasty or unpleasant. If anything, every now and then someone might be a little irritable, not in a good mood, and my nurse will say that patient is a little irritable or what have you. But when I walk in, no problem. I think they're just happy that I'm there and that I can make whatever is making them uncomfortable make them feel better.
That's amazing. And as we wrap up for with our talk here today, would you like to talk a little bit more about your book, why you wrote it, and some of the contents in it?
Sure. Um, for me, I was inspired primarily by young ladies that I've encountered over the course of practice. Because the mom discovered that she had lost her virginity or had engaged in, some sexual activity. And typically you could cut the tension with a knife in the room. The mother was upset. The young lady was kind of embarrassed that mom found out. And so, of course, the mother wants me to check her for STDs and for pregnancy. And as I conducted these exams, one of the things I found out is that typically a lot of the moms had not talked much with their daughters about the realities of sex, how to deal with their feelings, the changes in their body, the temptation when they have maybe this boy they have a crush on, and that tension is there. How do you handle it? And so this was the inevitable result. Now, I thought to myself, okay, this is happening over and over again, and there's not great communication between a lot of mothers and daughters, or just parents and daughters. But most of the time, it's going to be mom and the daughter who have these conversations, or at least should be having these conversations. And that's why I decided to write the book. And some of the positive feedback that I received, people said, Dr. Henry, I wish I'd had a book like this when I was growing up. The way my book is set up, it's both fact and fiction. I have the story of Nia. She's the title character, and we follow her from middle school through high school, college, med school, and then her young adulthood. And so, for example, not giving away too much, because of course I want you guys to get a copy of the book, but in the first chapter, her menstrual cycle comes on while she's at school. And so, I have the story part of that. And then at the end of each chapter is the fact part. So I come in as Dr. Kela, it's the let's talk part of the book. And I discuss the menstrual cycle. There's a little quiz in there. So, because a lot of young ladies still have some very erroneous ideas about menstrual cycle and sex and what have you. So I have that information in the book. I also address social media. I address preparing for college, how to prepare for medical school, relationships, all of these sorts of things. And so there's the fiction part as Nia is growing up, but then at the end of each chapter, I'm there talking about what just went on in that chapter. What are the factual things that we need to be looking for? And there's opportunities for the readers to take notes and to write down their ideas and journal some in the book.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming today and speaking with us. I think I found and left all the correct links in the chat. If everyone would like to check out her website, her Instagram, as well as Dr. Kayla's book special, the links are all in the chat. And again, thank you so much for coming. It was great having
Sure.
you.
Yes, thank you guys. I love doing this. So thank you so much for inviting me. And thank you all who showed up on this Saturday afternoon and participated.
All right, well, everyone have a great rest of your night. And yeah, thank you again. I'm going to
All
stop now.
right. You guys have a great day.